The distress beacon pulsed weakly through the void, barely distinguishable from cosmic background radiation. Most species would have ignored it, too faint, too risky, too far from established trade routes. But Sarah wasn't most species. She was human, and humans had an unfortunate tendency to investigate things that sensible beings left alone. Her salvage vessel, the Wandering Echo, descended through the atmosphere of the uncharted moon. The surface was a wasteland of crystalline formations and sulfuric geysers, completely inhospitable to carbon-based life. Yet the beacon persisted, originating from what appeared to be a crashed exploration pod half buried in violet sand. Sarah suited up and ventured outside, her boots crunching against the alien terrain. The pod's hull was torn open, its interior exposed to the toxic atmosphere. Whatever had been piloting it was long dead. A Kryn explorer, by the look of the skeletal remains, still strapped into the command chair. But it was what lay in the rear compartment that made Sarah's breath catch. 3 eggs, each the size of a human head, covered in obsidian black shells that seemed to absorb light. They pulsed with a bioluminescent purple glow, indicating the embryos inside were still viable. Sarah had seen enough xenobiology documentaries to know this was either the discovery of a lifetime or a terrible mistake. She chose the mistake. The Galactic Council's xenobiology database identified the eggs within seconds of her scan, Dravexian apex predators. The entry was flagged in 17 different warning colors. Dravexians were classified as extinction-class organisms, capable of hunting and eliminating entire planetary ecosystems. They were intelligent, pack-bonding, and possessed an adaptive physiology that allowed them to survive in almost any environment. The species had been declared extinct 300 cycles ago after the Kryn Collective had systematically eliminated them to protect colonization efforts. Apparently, one Kryn scientist had been trying to preserve them. And now that scientist was dead, leaving Sarah with 3 eggs containing the galaxy's most dangerous predators. The sensible thing would be to jettison the eggs into the nearest star. Sarah loaded them into her ship's environmental chamber instead. "You're going to get us killed," her ship's AI announced in its perpetually disappointed tone. "Probably," Sarah agreed, adjusting the chamber's temperature to match the specifications in the database. "But I'm not going to let them die without a chance." The eggs hatched 3 days later. The hatchlings emerged with obsidian fur that rippled like liquid shadow, eyes that glowed with inner fire, and claws that could shred reinforced steel. They were, objectively speaking, terrifying. They were also helpless, mewling for food and warmth with sounds that tugged at something primal in Sarah's chest. She named them based on their markings: Stripe, for the silver pattern along her spine; Whisper, for the pale patches around his ears; and Shadow, the largest, whose coat was unbroken midnight. Raising apex predators turned out to be remarkably similar to raising Earth cats, with one critical difference. Dravexians were smart. Frighteningly smart. By the second week, they understood basic commands. By the first month, they were solving puzzles designed for adult Kryn. By the third month, Whisper had figured out how to override the food dispenser's lock. "They're going to eat you," the AI warned daily. "They're babies," Sarah countered, watching Shadow attempt to squeeze his increasingly massive body into her lap. "They just need love and proper socialization." The AI's silence was eloquent. As the months passed, the hatchlings grew. Their playful pounces became powerful enough to dent bulkheads. Their hunting instincts emerged, turning every corridor into a potential ambush point. But they never, not once, turned those instincts on Sarah. She was pack. She was family. And Dravexians, the database had failed to mention, would die for their family. Sarah learned this when the pirates came. She had been careless, straying too close to the outer rim while searching for salvage. The pirates locked onto her signature and moved in, a crew of Vexler raiders known for selling human slaves at premium prices. They breached her hull with practiced efficiency, cutting through her defenses in minutes. Sarah had just enough time to seal herself in the bridge and send a distress signal before they overrode the door controls. 6 Vexler poured in, their quad arms holding an assortment of weapons. The leader, a scarred veteran with more cybernetics than original flesh, grinned with triple rows of teeth. "Rare find, a human this far out," he rasped. "You'll fetch." He never finished the sentence. Shadow emerged from the ventilation shaft above, a blur of obsidian fury. The pirate's head separated from his shoulders before his neural implants could register the attack. Stripe and Whisper came through the door behind the remaining raiders, moving with surgical precision. The IT was over in seconds. Sarah stood frozen, watching her babies methodically eliminate threats with the efficiency of trained assassins. They were covered in blue Vexler blood, their eyes blazing with protective fury. Shadow approached her slowly, massive head lowering. She should have been terrified. Instead, she reached out and scratched behind his ears, right where he liked it. "Good kitties," she whispered. The Shadow's purr was like distant thunder. The Galactic Council found her 3 weeks later, responding to the pirate vessel's automated distress beacon. The inspection team arrived expecting a crime scene. What they found was Sarah doing maintenance on her ship while 3 fully grown Dravexian apex predators lounged nearby, watching her work with protective vigilance. The council representative, a Kryn administrator named Vexcall, nearly suffered a cardiac event. Those are Dravexians," he stammered through his translator. "Extinction-class organisms. How are you still alive?" Sarah looked up from her welding. "I raised them from eggs. Why wouldn't I be alive? They're engineered killers. They wiped out 14 colonies before we—" He stopped, his chromatophores flashing distress colors. "You raised them? Found them abandoned on a dead moon. Couldn't just leave them." She shrugged. "They're good cats." Whisper chose that moment to bring her a piece of pirate debris, dropping it at her feet like a prize. She absently patted his head while the Kryn administrator's worldview shattered. Over the following hours, as council investigators examined the pirate ship and interviewed Sarah, a picture emerged that both fascinated and horrified the assembled xenobiologists. Dravexians, they realized, weren't mindless killers. They were pack predators with complex social structures, capable of loyalty and affection when properly socialized. The Kryn Collective hadn't been fighting monsters. They'd been fighting a species defending its territory from invaders. And humans, with their inexplicable talent for befriending deadly organisms, had proven what centuries of Kryn propaganda had denied. Vexcall found Sarah in her quarters that evening. Shadow was draped across her lap while she read, Stripe and Whisper flanking her like living shadows. "The council wants to study them," he said quietly, humanely, "to understand what my people destroyed." Sarah's expression hardened. "They're not specimens." "No," Vexcall agreed. "They're your family. I can see that now." He paused. "We found records in the pirate ship. You've been flagged for illegal xenobiological cultivation. I can make those charges disappear, but there will be conditions, such as you train others. Show us how to properly care for Dravexians. We've located 7 other preserved eggs in classified Kryn archives. They deserve a chance too." Sarah looked down at Shadow, who opened one blazing eye and purred. "Okay," she said finally, "but I choose the caretakers. And they have to understand, these aren't weapons. They're family." Vexcall's chromatophores shifted to a color Sarah's translator identified as profound respect. "Agreed." Years later, when Dravexians were successfully reintroduced to protected worlds across the galaxy, xenobiologists would study Sarah's methods. They would write papers on human pack bonding instincts and their seemingly supernatural ability to domesticate the undomesticable. But Sarah didn't care about papers or fame. She cared about the massive predator currently hogging her bed, the one stealing her rations, and the one who just brought her another gift from outside, as she'd saved 3 lives on a dead moon. And in return, they'd saved hers in ways she was still discovering. Sometimes, the galaxy didn't need warriors or diplomats. Sometimes, it just needed someone willing to care for the abandoned and the feared. Sometimes, it needed a human with too much heart and not enough sense. And sometimes, that was exactly enough.